today I'm happy that you're all fed already and we can just dive into some of the issues, and really we're going to focus on future forward. How do we move forward from here? So I'm going to kick it off with Brian. We talked a lot about resilience, and you said you had some key lessons that your organization learned and some of the things that you're implementing to be future ready. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you implemented and what resilience means to your organization?
Sure, Renée, I'm glad to. The word of the day seems to be resiliency nowadays, doesn't it? And all of our organizations are looking at what does that mean. There's financial resiliency, there's operational resiliency, and it's a lot of ways of thinking about how do I move my organization from today moving it forward in some kind of a process or a plan. So one of the things that within HCA HealthTrust is looking at financial resiliency to figure out what is the right way to position ourselves to think about the future. One of the things that we worked on right out of the gate was to look at shared services. So as I look at it from where I sit at HCA, we have a lot of hospitals, and we want to leverage that ability to share services across the enterprise, because anything that we do centrally can be leveraged across the organization. So working hard on how to do facility maintenance operations with our facilities through shared service. So one of the things through resiliency is think about what you're doing today and how can I share that expertise or those services. So one of the areas that we're dealing with is fire doors, HVAC maintenance, and we're using the right blend of contract maintenance versus in-house maintenance. And we're taking more of a programmatic approach to our PMs and our procedure for how that gets done. The other area that we're working on is regulatory compliance, just operational practices that can be captured and then moved across the organization. One of the things that I tell my team is that if they're not spending 80% of their time working on items that can scale across the organization, not spend their time correctly, if everyone's fighting fires, in other words, all the time, they're not taking advantage of the network effect. So if anything that you can do to take advantage of a network effect, particularly through a resiliency period of time, that'd be one of the first areas that I would move into.
That was such a thorough look at resiliency and just throughout your whole organization. Lee, we talked about the future of space. So resiliency in space, how do you address what the future of the workspace looks like?
I think on my sector of what we do the planning and real estate and construction. I think the spaces obviously are constricting. But yet the availability of space is advancing to the extent that people have downsized enough where in the real estate world, for us at least, we're able to get spaces for less money per square foot, but yet we're scaling down because of work from home. In construction and planning and everything else, I would say we did not have an impact as much as someone who needs to be in an office. We're out at sites, they're working regions. I've been able to put 4 hospitals for one person, 3 hospitals for another, so their commute is less onerous. I think the use of space at this point, now that it's downsizing, you can still have people in an office, you're paying less, it goes back into capital, but also the fact that I think it's getting closer on our medical office buildings, our specialty cares. It's getting closer to the main hub. So if you need to send someone to a hospital, or you need to send someone to an ambulatory surgical center, you can get them there faster, because now spaces that used to be are crowded, there's now a glut of space. So I think to your point, we can think as a network and get everybody closer to the main hospitals, faster in and out. I think to take advantage of the situation, I think that's one of the things you want to do. You're going to spend less money, you're going to get them closer, you're going to keep them at home when they need to, 2-3 times a week. And in construction and planning, I think that lends itself really well to it.
So I noticed in my area, we had micro hospitals that were cropping up everywhere, and then all of a sudden they're all closing now. They were supposed to be feeders for the main hospital, and they just weren't being financially supported. So Jamie, when we were talking last night, you said One Medical is about providing that primary care in retail spaces. So what do you see as your growth model moving forward in those retail spaces?
Yeah, I mean, Jamie Goldberg, by the way, One Medical, we do CI care around, so we have to introduce ourselves. So I head up the real estate design, construction, and facilities lease admin function for One Medical. We're independent primary care across many markets in the US. So back to your question, I guess, I mean, our strategy is really going into retail spaces where people, work and live. Pre-pandemic, we were really focused on a lot of urban markets where we were convenient. So if people needed to make a doctor's appointment, see a primary care physician, they could do it as a part of their day and not, ruin their day by having to take time off from work. As we've seen patterns change with people working from home, with hybrid work kind of being the new buzzword, where people will be in the office a few days a week, working from home a few days a week, we're really targeting more kind of these hybrid locations where there's still density of population where people live, but also some workplaces as well. So we're expanding into other markets, new markets that we may have been looking at in the future, that we're speeding up kind of our strategy to go into kind of the outlying markets. And so that's our strategy going forward, is really hitting those locations that are still convenient for people, but going a little bit closer to where they live as opposed to where they work.
Telemedicine is now obviously the norm. It used to be something that we talked about, didn't really get heavily utilized, and it has become what we have to do in today's times. So over the last 18 months, we've seen that shift. I'm going to ask all of you, just whoever wants to chime in, what do you see as the future of virtual care and right-sizing that as we move forward, as patients are going back to seeing physicians and their providers in person? Where are we headed with telemedicine as a whole?
I think it's all by itself. I think it's specific to your region. The closer we get to the city, the more broadband, for at least where we are, the more you use it. We have 4 or 5 hospitals in very rural areas. The less we see more patients. So as far as I'm concerned, it needs to be almost geared towards your hospital location and where you have the most primary care. So you're going to have a doctor in a rural area and a patient who wants to come in, he's or she doesn't have a wearable, so they need to look in their eyes, they need to look in their ears, they need to hear their back breathing. It's not going to be virtual for those people who are more remote. But again, in the cities where we are, it's different. I mean, you're gonna have more wearables. You're gonna have people who are more apt to go with that kind of model. I think it's wherever you are.
I think COVID has clearly accelerated telemedicine much faster than it would have ordinarily. We've seen that, and I think we all understand intuitively the advantage of it, those who have actually experienced it or just see the value that it provides. Interestingly, though, it hasn't gone as an adoption rate as fast as you might think that is. If you go to most hospitals today, you will still see them very busy with inpatients, crowded hallways, beds full, staff overworked. So it's not quite there yet. It kind of another parallel of that industry is the Internet of Things, IoT. It's like we're talking about the exciting things that IoT can do in building systems, operation, and clearly can do that, but it's still, the adoption rate is still going gradually. So telemedicine, I think there's some things yet to catch up with it, and then there's probably going to be some kind of a quantum event that will happen where it'll just make a massive shift for some reason. Yet what that is, we don't quite know yet, but I believe it's here to stay, and I think we'll see that really grow exponentially one time.
It's probably going to be generational.
Yes.
I think when you get out of I think for me, the baby boomer, the boomer as they call us, we're even though we in this field are very technologically advanced, I think as far as age, I watch my kids and they're doctors, so they love it, but then again, they're seeing patients that don't. So I think as we, I guess, find another place to sleep, if you know what I mean, I think it's going to start to escalate.
At One Medical, telemedicine was always part of our platform, but more as like a triage. So we always had the ability to have video visits with providers, but it was more triage after hours. It wasn't an event that we got compensated for from insurance companies. It was kind of a part of the platform, a part of the offering. We saw with the pandemic shift where regulations loosened, where insurance companies paid more for telemedicine, for video visits, and that created a big shift in the industry.
Do you think it's going to stay that way?
I mean, they've already started tightening up a lot of the rules.
That's right.
But I think that, that one of the channels that I've heard in the retail, my background is more retail, is omni-channel. It's this, kind of diversified services of how you deliver services. And I see that applying to telemedicine, where it's going to be here to stay for certain functions, for certain maybe follow-up care, but the interaction with the physician in an office is not going to go away. There'll be shifts, there'll be different things that happen with telemedicine. It is here to stay, but we're already seeing a shift towards more in-person visits than we were during the pandemic. So it's kind of going to be a wait and see approach to see what happens, but I don't think it's going away.
I don't believe it's going away, and I know I use virtual as well as in person, and I think the future is really a blend of the two. So we'll see how that pans out. And I have lights in my eyes, so if there's any questions from the audience, please make sure you're getting Nicole's attention, or if you want to chime in. Does anybody else want to chime in on the future of what they believe telemedicine, what they're seeing in their organizations?
See, it's the opposite. You're thinking they wanted to eat last time. Now everybody
Now
ate,
they want to sleep.
and we just want to sleep.
All right. Well, feel free to chime in. We'd love to have your comments as well. So we're going to move a little bit towards some of the challenges around supply chain, and I know this is very painful for a lot of people, and we're all experiencing this. But moving forward, Lee, we talked about some of the disruptions you're having on projects, labor shortages, material shortages, long lead times. How are you managing that whole process and still delivering on your projects?
Pre-purchase as much as you can. We started about a year ago. We did not see 5,000 ships in the ocean, cities, but I started to pre-purchase the long lead items at that point that were big time. I mean, you're looking at steels. Doors have always been, if you want to get down to the micro of it. But as far as I'm concerned, it is also manpower, like you said. Now, I have a program that goes into tech schools, which is where a lot of kids should go because they're not college students, but I think mostly. As far as I'm concerned, I go in to protect for the facilities right away. We mentor. So as far as manpower within the hospitals, I think we have a real good outreach to stay with that. There are tech schools popping up everywhere, so I think we use that. But the materials itself, I'm warehousing a lot because you can get a warehouse now for $3-4 a square foot. It used to be a lot more, maybe 8 to 12. The Amazons of the world that are building warehouses where I am now, and it's 1.5 million square feet, they literally, I don't know if you've dealt with this, Amazon ends up over ordering for everything. So you got to be agile, and you find out what that is, and they're not going to send it to the next one down in Tennessee. So you make a deal and you keep some steel. You just have to, I think it's agility. It's thinking outside of, and I can't stand the saying, but outside the box, as if it's the scarcity of food. So if it was food, I think we'd all find a way to get some food. Well, especially me, I'd find a way to get food. But that being said, I think we need to treat our materials the same way. So if you do get doors, let's just say you need lead doors, I overorder. Because I know 3 months from now, I'm going to do another MRI. 4 months, because it's on the schedule. So I'll overorder. So now it's a 22-week lead. It's a 0 lead in a warehouse 15 minutes away because I'm storing it.
So if there's ever a toilet paper shortage, again, we need to be calling you because,
Correct.
because your attic is probably full.
I'm taking toilet paper with me back to Philly.
I just think it's funny you mentioned doors. I just think it's funny you mentioned doors. That's one of our biggest problems.
Yeah.
I mean, we put in temporary doors. Doors never come on time. You would think such a simple thing would be easy to accomplish, and in our project, it always seems to be an issue. But we've seen scarcity of supplies. We've seen, materials for our furniture not come on time, have to, order different furniture, switch lighting. So we've had to make a lot of changes during the pandemic because materials aren't there. We had a project going up in Columbus, Ohio, where they didn't have studs.
Yeah.
To build the interior build out. We had to ship them in from Chicago. to get them to Columbus. So it's really impacted the way we work. And one of the things we always talk about in my group is hashtag hit the date. So we have a date out there that we have to hit, that we have providers hired, that we are opening panels for patients, and we have a medical office that we have to open, and we have to hit that date and find a way. And sometimes we have to be very creative in how we do that in these times. And sometimes we don't build out the whole office. We build out the exam rooms that are needed for patient care at that time, and then work when materials come in. So it's been a big shift.
Do you purchase Prime to you, or do you use your CMs or GCs to purchase?
We have our GCs purchased, but we give our suppliers our order for kind of our project total for the year so they can manufacture.
That's what I'm doing.
GCs do it.
It's not only saves you in money, but what it does is there are purchasing advantages. If I hire a GC or a CM, it's a $500 million company, but yet I have, like what you build, quick PCPs, right. I might have a $3 million contractor, $40 million a year he might do. His purchasing power is not like the $500 million contractor. Ooh, I'm sorry, let alone the purchasing power we have. Mm-hmm. So that's the model. I'm following the same as you.
Right.
And you're bigger than us.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we run into is my team deals specifically with capital reinvestment, so it's replacing systems that are in place, new chillers, replacement chillers, boilers, et cetera. And a little bit of challenge the supply chain is given to that is that you have a twofold problem. One is you're trying to coordinate all your supplies coming to the job site to do the work, but you're also dealing with the downtime situation of taking systems offline to install a new system. So you have to double down to make sure that you have supplies there. And as we know, you can have 10 supply items. If one's missing, you cannot complete. You have to have everything. So what we're able to do in certain circumstances is we have several projects going on at the same time across the country. If necessary, we can take a chiller that's coming online sooner at some location and switch them if that's a possibility. Also, we found too on supply chain is now more than ever, you have to be very diligent on to order supplies ahead of time, prepaying, anything that you can do to have your speed of payment is very, very important. If I'm a supplier and I know you are a customer and you're paying rapid pay, I'm gonna be more likely to sell things to you than if I think you're slow pay. So now more than ever with supply chain challenges, you've got to think about how to be very rapid and agile in your payment process.
I got a question for you.
Well, I'm going to move it to the audience for just a second.
Do you see the time? I can't see the time.
I can't see it either, but I've got it right here. So I'm going to keep you guys on track. But Dion, I believe we've got a question from Dion or a comment.
Yeah, to answer the first question about telehealth, how we're handling it at our hospital systems, is that it's, like you say, it's here to stay. It's a part of one of our inpatient and outpatient process, so it's definitely something here to stay. I put an analogy as the ATMs. When the ATMs come, everybody thought that tellers were going to disappear, but they are still here. So it's a combination of both, especially now in the pandemic, people are missing that social interaction. So a lot of people will still want to go in and see their provider, still go into the office and see that. Somebody like me, I have a reoccurring precondition, so follow-up, I don't need to go into the office. Matter of fact, I live in Tampa, my doctor's in Miami, so I do that. So I think it's a part of healthcare and it's here to stay. Some states are cracking down more than others, some are loosening up more than others. So it all depends, like you said, it all depends on your location. My other question, and I think you answered the gentleman in the middle, answered about doors and other things you can pre-order, that's good, but stuff like chillers and air handling units that are custom or not placed until you actually get them a PO, it's hard to pre-order that or do those kind of things. You answered the question about shifting. We can't do shifting like that, but one of the things we do now in our construction projects is that we don't start a project until those big items are there, until the chiller is sitting somewhere, until the air handler is there. Then you work. Before, we used to try to schedule it, and we found that even trying to schedule it, they said here on Monday, that's 2 weeks later.
How does your administration take to the fact that you're now adding 10 weeks to the schedule?
Right, correct, exactly.
So now,
Yeah, exactly.
and you're losing money.
Yeah, in
So-
reality, I've seen that, and I've seen that too. I mean, I process progress payments and schedule changes through all the projects that we deal with across the company portfolio at HCA. And no doubt, I've seen all kinds of change orders coming because of the fact they have increased the cost of materials, so there is some inflation that is absolutely happening. There's
And
also
labor.
in labor, and there's a time delay too. So basically, we set up at a capital budget every year, so we had one in 2020, and clearly we couldn't spend that fast enough because we simply just could not get the projects done in time. So we had to move it to 2021, and now we're going to have some of that spillover. And so we definitely had some delays that we're working through. There was just no way to avoid those.
I do have a secret, and you guys might benefit from it and steal something from me. There's a lot of hospitals that we have purchased that we either close, or a lot of other people that have closed. So they're decommissioning. So the MRIs and everything else are maybe not necessarily at end of life, let alone the units on the roof. So I have companies that I know that are decommissioning hospitals, literally made the call before we got on stage. I'm getting an HVAC unit that has 7 years, and I'm going to get it at hardly anything because the hospital went out of business. I'll send a crane tomorrow
Yeah.
to get the unit. So that's part of the agility and changes we have to make.
That's exciting because that's the way of thinking creatively. That's where all of us together collectively can use that to figure out how do we work our way through the situation and be creative, and that's an example of that.
Yeah. It's a shame because you're picking bones, but
Yeah.
if it's got 7 years left, at least it'll get me over the hump of a 22-week lead. The MRI gets started, take it down for a day or so, and put the new one on.
Yeah, but I think we're all feeling that challenges
Oh, my
too.
God,
We had a new office in Wicker Park where a unit went out, and we couldn't get the unit. My son lives in that area in Chicago, and he goes into that office and he sees all the temporary units and the medical staff, and the folks are not real happy. He calls me up, "Dad, did you know at the Wicker Park office the air conditioning is not working?" I go, "Yes, Andrew, I'm very well aware of it. I get calls and 10 emails a day on this issue, but thank you for caring about the people in that office." But
It's tough when your kids yell at you.
I know it is. It's like, how are you not fixing this right away? And I think there's a perception out there that we are like doing something wrong too, that we can't fix it right away, but the supply chain really impacts so many things that we see every day.
Well, Brian, you didn't really dive into how that's impacting your GPOs and what are you seeing as the change in the GPO purchasing process because of the supply chain issues?
Well, I think more than ever, it's going to take a lot of strong collaboration with our vendors that are part of GPOs to make sure that we understand what their challenges are so that we can leverage their purchasing power and understand their supply chain issues so that as we're taking advantage of that relationship, that their fulfillment is very clear and transparent. I mean, we'll get updates on where a particular piece of equipment is on the assembly line, and they will contact us and say, you know what, we've got you stalled on the assembly line. We don't have a part, so you're going to be delayed. So it just the things you have to deal with, you didn't have to deal with before. And so, again, a GPO's function is it's taking the advantage of a lot of people coming together for buying power and kind of a focus on a sourcing area, which I have to be honest, it's a challenging area in the facility capital investment space. And the reason is that engineers, architects, design experts all have different opinions about what the best thing is to solve the problem. And so how do you try to get everybody to agree on one LED light fixture you're going to use across the entire GPO platform, and that will never happen.
Nope.
So it has its challenges, but you try the best you can.
I think as a GP, we use GPO on a lot of purchases. In the construction, planning, the real estate side, it doesn't necessarily lend itself. Like you said, there's the challenges where I think they acquiesce more to the fact that, okay, now across the board, it's a 22-week lead. And when you go across the board, everybody they serve, and whether we're a partner with them or not, which we normally are, as far as even profit from it, 2-3%, whatever, it pays to stay local. Because now you might be able to get something that everybody else is accepting at 22 weeks. So now we have to think outside the GPO.
So a question to the audience is, do you think just-in-time will come back, or do you think now we've learned a lesson about a combination, maybe a hybrid of just-in-time and warehousing?
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how that industry changes based on this lesson.
Your metal
Anybody?
studs, how'd you get your metal studs?
I mean, our same GC had a project in Chicago for us, and he was back ordered on some other things, so he took the studs from Chicago, brought it to Columbus, and then was waiting on his studs in Chicago.
That's the agility.
Yeah.
We've been doing a little bit of that for years, and I'm going to date myself a little bit. I think it was 1994 or 5 when Cerner was just a startup company, and I was charged with building a space for Cerner in my hospital. And literally, I'm meeting with the CEO of Cerner and the top execs because it was literally a startup. And our CEO of the hospital signed a deal that I was going to have a vision center built for Cerner in 30 days. And signed the deal, and it was like $1 million penalty if the space wasn't built out. And I had no doors, frames, hardware, nothing. We didn't even have a design. We didn't have it permitted. And we accomplished it, but it was literally taking materials from every project I could find within the health system, robbing materials, begging, borrowing, stealing.
You don't sign a liquidated damages that's like that anymore, right?
Oh, I didn't sign it.
Your CEO, your CEO, he's learned that, right?
Well, and I don't work there anymore. I mean, he's since,
so.
I'm dating myself. He's since way retired, but
That was his last deal.
Yeah, of course. You better be.
I don't know if there's anyone from UC San Diego in the audience.
Right there in the corner.
I don't know if you remember that with One Medical, our CEO said we would have these locations open at this time, and I got there and I was like, what? What's my time frame? And sadly, we did not hit the date, and those locations opened a little bit later.
Did it cost you $1 million?
Did not. It did not. It cost me a lot of difficult calls with building my relationship with UC San Diego, though.
Wow.
Do you like him at all? You're mixed.
I kind of felt that you were thinking about that same thing, so I had a comment on it.
So changing direction a little bit, when we were getting together and planning for this, we talked a lot about innovation, and innovation's a great word. We talk about how it's going to shape the future of healthcare, and Brian, one of the things that really struck me is how you're leveraging IoT for efficiencies beyond energy efficiencies, beyond just risk management, and you were talking about how you're seeing that as a future, O2 monitoring, some other things. Do you want to elaborate on that and share with the audience?
Sure. First of all, I want to make sure I define that an idea and innovation do not equal each other. I mean, you can have ideas all day long. Innovation is a little bit different. That is, you can take a variety of ideas, but how do you think about implementing, testing, and moving those forward to an actionable sort of way? And so a bunch of ideas out there randomly will not work. So the idea is this whole idea of IoT, there's a lot of thoughts around what is innovative and what are ideas around IoT. So you go back to the root causes. What is the problem to be solved? What is the job to be done? You always ask that question. And then you say, okay, what is the technology solutions to do that? So the idea, going back to the idea to the innovation is, how do we deal with the common problem of room pressure relationships within, say, critical environments, operating rooms, in other words? So you need to know pressure, temperature, humidity. You might want to monitor, filtration, et cetera. So you can go through there and figure that out, but how do you do that economically and effectively? So IoT, if you think about every sensor has its own unique aspect, can you quickly and easily install a sensor that monitors that? So we've tested some of those ideas. In one particular case, we were able to complete outfit 6 ORs in 6 hours with just putting basically technology in the ceiling that was all connected wirelessly through using IoT technology. It's not really ready for prime time yet, but the idea is, I think that's where it needs to get to. It's always, how do you install the edge device, and how does that edge device eventually communicate to some kind of a gateway connector that gets it out to the internet? The database, the software platform, that's somewhat of the easiest part, because you can work on that anywhere, anytime. The question is, how do you get the data from the origination point through the system to get it to there to do the analysis that you need to do? So the industry is still developing. We're looking at water management as an IoT solution as well. And I'm all for people to bring ideas. There's companies out there that make these little sensors that are the size of a postage stamp, and they're connected to a wireless connector. It's a lot of vertical solutions that are still out there today in IoT, And the idea is what you want to have really is how do I get the data at a single point that I can make that data move to whatever through an API, a connecting software connection to get the data to the right person. So I'll give you a specific example is one of the, another sensor that was installed in the operating room was the ability to monitor if someone was laying on the surgical table. So you could know the environmental conditions and know if somebody's on the operating room table. Well, that helps you on knowing the environmental conditions of the space, but also you could have someone that looking at workflow optimization can also look at that same data point. So you don't have to duplicate one data point, you can use it for other workflow applications. So that's the advantage if you can have some autonomy around IoT sensors, is you can use it for multiple applications woven into operational decisions.
That's real interesting. So you're going to be able to monitor the productivity of your surgeon.
Right.
And how long they stay on the table.
Right.
Oh, that's going to work.
Yeah, I've heard that surgeons...
You have to get a microchip. We can't get them either.
I've heard surgeons, once you put them compete each other, it's amazing what things happen. You know, they don't want to be the outlier either way, right?
It's like Steve said.
Yeah.
You know, the last time they were ever updated or trained is when they first got out of medical school.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But they're very competitive.
They are competitive.
Very competitive. So Lee, we talked a lot last night about construction and how you're incorporating technology into construction. So we've got all this great IoT, this data lake, but what are you doing in construction to really move the needle with technology?
I think in the field, I think is the most for us, and then back with the facilities department. I think pretty much everybody's doing it. It's just you just have to continue to get better at it. So you start with a BIM model, and then you're taking electronic pictures. You're able to follow every single room on an iPad, and the process, and not only the process, the progress. You take one snap of a ceiling, the software will know that you've just that day hung 200 feet of ductwork in a brand new hospital. The next day it's 300. The algorithm will tell you it should be 250 on average. And as you go through, you know your schedule monitoring, because of the software, is much better. So on a bigger scale, even on a smaller scale, but on a bigger scale, the more advantage you get, the more you automate. So it comes down to how you monitor it and how you run it for now, because I don't know if everybody's all familiar with it, but I think it's going to get better. Problem again with that is, for even clash detection, the field still makes the decisions. So somewhere along the line, we've got to be able to get that information to a contractor, to a subcontractor, to a prefab, so it gets to the point where they all mesh. And again, you know, architects like to say IPD and everything, they're working together, but they've been doing that for 50 years. It's just a name. Somehow, I think technology is going to join them together.
And Jamie, you also talked about how you're incorporating technology for your One Medical model. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, we use technology in a lot of what we do. I mean, you know, we say we're technology-based primary care. So technology is really important for how we set up our care model, but it's also very important for what we do in the field when we build locations, where we have like standard prototypes that really can work for all ages. We just acquired Iora Health, so now we have seniors in the model as well. And how do we build facilities that can take care of children all the way through seniors? So we're trying to have this model that works in all locations, that really helps all, can you know, have one model for all ages. So we have to really work on prototypes. We have to standardize things so that when we go out to the field, we're not encountering the issues that you have, where you have to make field decisions on changes and you have to bring it back to the architect to sign off. That's where you get delays and that's where you have issues. So it's really trying to, on the front end, really address a lot of those issues so you minimize them in the field. But the technology is kind of, you know, what One Medical is about, from, you know, our own EMR that interacts with our health system partners' EMRs, how we use that to interact with patients, so that all that information is there for our primary care physicians, so they don't have to repeatedly ask the same questions all the time. They have that information and they can start that conversation.
It's time for standardization and prototypical parts and pieces. We've all been talking about that.
Yep.
And that's what we just got the 4 hospitals. It's a brand, first of all, because it is exactly what yours is. It's a retail.
Yep.
So you drive by, you know it's a St. Luke's hospital. You go inside, maybe it's changed a little bit based on its location. But other than that, it's every head wall, everything we do, whether it's planning or construction, including real estate, the kinds of properties we buy. So I think it finally has to happen, standardization and prototypical Pete's.
It was interesting. Last week I was at the New York State Healthcare Engineers Conference, and they had a robot moving around, and so we didn't really talk about this when we were prepping for this panel discussion. But they had a robot moving around, and I'm talking to the company. They said, we're solving problems that we don't even know they're what's coming. And facilities will come to us and say, we've got this problem of we need to deliver this to this, or how do we manage going to see if a fire alarm goes off, sending the robot or the drone or whatever that is first to see if there's really smoke or if it's a false alarm. So it was interesting, and we didn't really talk about robotics and drones and what the future of that looks like to help us manage our facilities. Any thoughts on that? So I'm going to get you guys on your feet. This is throw you a curveball.
I think the most important thing to think about for technology in the future is, because of the labor shortage, we're going to have to bring in people that have different sets of skills, expertise-wise. So before it used to be that I guess maintenance was kind of a cottage industry, meaning it was part of the facilities team. You developed it, you had the expertise built in-house, you trained those individuals. But what's happened over time is that our staffing sizes have shrunk, and because of there's financial resiliency issues we have to deal with, and secondly, just the skills training part of that as well, so we don't have a lot of specialty technicians to work on things. So that all being said, how do we use technology to have a person that can come into your facility, quickly diagnose, or better yet, predictively analyze what is going on with your equipment before they arrive, so when they go there, you can specifically fix a problem versus, somebody says it's too warm here. Well, you don't know why that is, but now you would know exactly why it is through predictive technology. So maybe it's not necessarily robotics, but it's equipping people better to understand specifically what parts do I need on the truck, how do I service that request, where is it at, who do I contact, and those things are where I think it's really going to be important that we have a new skill set out there, that we compensate an individual with that skill that is a combination of hands-on and technical skill to solve these problems with these more technical systems that are being installed.
I'm going to look to the audience. Any comments from the audience on how you're using technology, what you see that future use case for technology is? We've got, sorry, the lights are right in my eyes.
Sorry about that.
No,
Clayton Mitchell with Jefferson. I think that, I think all the comments about the workforce and having the talent that you need, the graying of the workforce, the tsunami, the retirement tsunami. So we're looking at a network operations center concept to sort of, pull that into sort of a common area so we can use a higher level of talent to do a lot of the monitoring control and use our technicians exactly where we need to use them. So pull staff away from monitoring control, leveraging technology, AI, IoT to do a lot of that, and really sort of move into that smart infrastructure model. And that has to be done, and the comment about bringing non-traditional folks into the mix, going outside healthcare, bringing other talented folks in to be able to think about solving those problems in different ways is going to be crucial, I think, for our success.
Clayton, I appreciate that. That very well said. And I know that I experienced over last summer a 93-year-old aunt, and I'm trying to help her in the hospital, and this robot comes into the room that's a psychiatric evaluation. She's 93 and having medical issues, and she absolutely did not want to talk to the robot. There was no way we were getting her to talk to a robot with a screen and a person on it. So we still have the disparity in the patient population and people that still don't have smartphones. So we didn't talk yet about room technology and integrating building technologies. So what does the future look like for, and I'm going to open this to all of you, what does the future look like for integrating clinical technologies with building technologies, and where do we see the efficiencies driving that for the future?
Well, going back to merging clinical data to building data is, first of all, we have to take the silo down because we just need a bunch of data points to be able to figure out how to want to analyze the information, because we're not quite sure what we can learn from that. Is it throughput? Is it something regarding infection control? Is it is it cleaning the room? Whatever. There might be a lot of things that you're trying to pull into there. So really, what the future holds is a sensor array that's put into a room that connects to that data to the clinical record as well, and then allowing people access, I guess you might call it, to that data to be able to then do their individual analysis around it, because there is definitely some facility-related environmental issues that obviously impact clinical outcomes. So we want to clearly identify and focus on those areas, and some may be other areas, but we need to really just sort of create a universe of data points to be able to bring it forward to do the analysis.
And Jamie, we talked also about that, and by the way, you're very good at taking notes. I can tell you've got a legal background. You can tell he's an attorney who's got the note-taking going on.
But he has his personality.
An attorney with a personality is even better. It's scary. And we talked about One Medical and how you're using that technology, and what does that mean for you in the future?
Yeah, the technology for us is really, analyzing, what tasks are being done, how we can take tasks out of the primary care physician's workload so that they can focus on patients. So we have a lot of analytics on how many tasks are being done, how many tasks are being done by administrative staff, either on-site or at kind of hubs for administration and medical records helps. So it's how do we use that technology to monitor, how long it takes to answer a call, how long it takes to get the video visit set up and get to a provider, how long are the tasks taking. We look at, when are tasks being done? Are they being done right after a patient is seen? Are they being done at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the patients are done? And really trying to understand where we put the help in and where the administrative tasks, could be in to take those tasks. So technology is very important for how we analyze it so that we continue to have the ability to build a patient relationship. So that's how it works on the care model. On the kind of the real estate side and the other side, it's just really understanding utilization of rooms, utilization of how busy panels are, and how we can build the facilities to really help with that experience. So that's kind of what we do.
And we're going to talk a little bit now more moving towards the future and how healthcare facilities are going to change, because they're going to change. We have to adapt and change. So Lee, really want to have you talk about design, construction, operation, digitization of data. Where are we going? What does the future of the built environment look like for you and your organization?
I think a lot of it has to do, again, I know I'm beating a horse here, where you are. I'm building hospitals now in rural areas, and we're making them warm. We're making them comfortable, as opposed to where you would standardize a room temperature, and you might hear that somebody's hot or whatever. It's all individually. It's all on their phones. Their kids will do it. It's also not necessarily on a phone. It's something that's digital that they can touch or feel. With the older population, if you make it intuitive, as most technology is not intuitive in my mind, make it as simple and as intuitive as you can. And I think the same thing goes with the actual building itself. You always hear about your panelization or your prefab and everything else. I think when you get to the model where they actually are standardized, we're doing our typical 4-story, and it's going up, it's 250,000 square feet. It's going up in 17, 18 months, not including site prep. As far as I'm concerned, that gets the patients the comfort factor that not only rebuilding it like that, we are competent. If they see something going up and it's taken them 2.5 years, they think, what's wrong with the hospital? Well, your contractor is a reflection of you. Your architect is a reflection of you. When they walk in, I think the technology makes them feel like you're competent, but it's not, antiseptic. So I think we're more about, at this point, again, standardization, where they know they're going, even if they're 20 miles away, they're going to the same place. I know it sounds terrible to say, but it's retailization. They know when they see the arches, they're going to get the same, I mean, I don't need it, but they get the same quarter pounder. So I think the technology allows you, for you, I think, traveling the country, where we're within, 150-mile radius, I think that's even better to get, when you standardize, to have maybe a cadre of contractors, a cadre of architects. And I try to stay local, so it's a little harder. So I'll get an architect or builder somewhere local, so they know when they sit down at dinner, they're working with somebody that's working on their hospital. So although technology happens, I think for this time, it also has to be integrated with the person and the feel and how you feel about healthcare. I still believe, and this is the way we design, that it's still something at the dinner table as opposed to something on your iPad. So I think I'm fighting it, I guess people would look at it that way. But unless you're acquiring, and we do acquire hospitals, you're acquiring within a 30, 40-mile radius. If you're doing that, I can understand it. The technology, everything else, you're dealing with pretty much the same population. I get it. But if you're spread out, like you would be, you're going to want that recognition, and you're going to want to be able to say, okay, maybe even hanging pictures. You're in a rural area, and you put a picture up that's it's an old dirt road that used to be an old dirt road that took you there. So we're doing a lot of that. We're still patient. I know it was not supposed to be patient-centered, but we're area-centered. We're logistically centered. So I think when you do those demographics and you do the analytics, tells you about these people. You ask the right questions on Instagram or Facebook. A lot of older people are on Facebook. But you ask the right questions, you get a feel for who they are. That technology can be integrated into your space. I think that matters.
Well, my daughter would say that I'm old because I actually do use Facebook to keep up with my relatives in England.
Yeah.
So, it actually is, the older you are, the more likely you are to use Facebook. So,
and we know that just from the data points that we come up with. Yeah.
But even, you talked a little bit about the community, and I have built 3 critical access, actually I've worked on a lot of critical access hospitals, but 3 replacement critical access hospitals, and one was in the town in Missouri that is famous for the home of being sliced bread. So the individual that invented the bread slicer, and it was really important when you're working in those communities, your construction team, and you have to become a part of that community and their culture to really impact how you're, not just the physical built environment, but making sure that they buy in and they're a part of that medical community and that building and that whole culture that you're building for them. And
you use the social media and technology to tell you. So you put a bread slicer on your check-in, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You'll know where the weak spots are. And I know it sounds terrible, but you'll know where they'll go, as opposed to maybe the competition that doesn't do that research.
Absolutely. So we're going to go to kind of what I would call our wrap-up question, and we have about, since we can't really see the time, but we have about 10 minutes left.
At 11:50.
11 minutes, give or take. And I really want to make sure all of you have an opportunity to answer this, because I think there were some really profound things that came out of our discussions prepping for this, and it's all about the great opportunity that we've gained from the last 18 months of, there's our 11 minutes remaining. There we go.
Was that you, Nicole? It could not have been a robot.
That's AI for you.
That's right.
The great opportunity that's really come from the knowledge that we've gotten over the last 18 months. So there's been a tremendous amount of things we've learned. So I'm going to start it off with you, Brian. What are some of the things, this big, great knowledge that you've gained, and how that's going to change the way you approach business, your organization, moving forward?
Sure. One of the statements that we're all very familiar with is best practice. So, and the Joint Commission doesn't use that term, they use leading practice. But it really comes down to a practice is a summation of trade-offs, right? It's what the function is, how it works in the organization, the cost, the efficiency, and its life cycle kind of analysis to how you do that. So what I'm getting to with sort of thinking going forward is you really have to think, and this is really a great opportunity, because when things are somewhat semi-broken, because we've had to deal with a lot of issues that were the status quo, right? It actually presents a lot of opportunity, because what it does, it's looking for people to figure out how to solve problems. So what you need to do is step back, and we were talking earlier about it's easy to get angry about things, and this is not the time to get angry, it's a time to do something, and to be truthful about how you do it, to share the optionality of how you do that. You know, one of the things that I really talk a lot about is when you think of solutions, think of things in options. So if I do this, this might happen. If I do this, this might happen. But I think senior management likes to have their team think about, okay, there's not just one size fits all, but have you thought through the possibilities and explain the trade-offs, so as we're making the decision, we know what those trade-off potential outcomes might be. So give some thought to that, put a lot of smart people around you, because that's really what happens. A book I read about a couple years ago is 9 Lies About Work, and I actually took my team through that. And through that whole process, the success of your group really resides around your team. And so bring your team in close, ask for their ideas, and really do some trade-off about what that might look for your organization. I would say talk with a lot of people. You being here today, for example, and listening to us on the stage is a perspective, and I know all of you have perspectives, and I look forward to meeting you and hearing your ideas as well. And then as we leave here, we'll know some better thoughts to move forward on. So I would just say more than anything, and to summarize, is just be open to the idea of always learning, be teachable, and bring your team together and ask for solutions, and then go out there and experiment and try.
Jamie, I'm going to direct it to you.
Sure.
Same question.
That's an interesting question. I mean, we learned a lot of things, right? We learned that telemedicine can work, that, you know, sometimes the government will be reasonable and loosen regulations and crisis, that insurance companies will cooperate, that, I mean, we saw a lot of cooperation. But we also saw a lot of things change, with things closed down, with cities not issuing permits for how you get a permit during times when you used to go and walk in and kind of discuss, you know, get it over the counter, or you could sit down and get a pre-read on your plans. And, you know, things took longer, and trying to put that into your timelines, and how you would set up our offices where you couldn't really travel and had to rely on local teams and local contractors. And we learned that it can work, but it doesn't replace getting out to the field and seeing it. So we really, really learned the importance that you do need to be there, and you do need to be present. But we learned that we have to do it different, and some of those things will stay. We'll see that we will do certain things remote going forward, but still getting out to the field is important. So we just learned so many things, but as we come together as teams, we've really realized that connection is still important. That when we go back to our headquarters in the financial district in San Francisco and see each other and meet, that we're very productive. We can be productive other ways. We don't have to be there every day, but we do get a lot of productivity seeing people live in person. So we learned a lot of things. I think we'll continue to learn things. I think it's going to look a lot different in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years than it does today. And I'm very excited to see what that looks like.
Lee?
They didn't leave much room for me.
Oh, sorry.
I think what it's done for me, and I know it's going to seem odd, my hiring is different, the type of people I hire. I think what we've seen in the last 2 years, the specialist, the guy that just works on boilers, if something goes awry, it's hard for him to handle it. And I'm hiring more intuitive, insightful type of people that maybe that's not their specialty, but they are intelligent. They have an acumen that, you know, quick pickup, but they're also able to work with people because of the frustration that's showed, and the short attention span, and shorter fuses, and less patience. So I actually just recently hired about 3 or 4 project managers and 1 assistant that we're on the periphery of construction or not at all. Some retail who were service oriented. And I think this hopefully is here to stay because it's more human. I mean, I know we're talking AI and everything else. My hiring practices have changed. I want somebody to be able to be in a room and not necessarily want to bully someone or tell them that's the way it works. I want them to be able to be intuitive, insightful, be able to read a room, which is a little different than the engineers I'm used to hiring and things like that, of which I am one, but you know, I think that's what's changed a lot, the people I hire.
Very, very insightful, and collaboration is key, especially we have all been looking at computer screens for way too long, and I think that the collaboration that happens when you can sit in the room and actually interact with people in person is dramatically different. So I'm going to open it up. We've got a few more minutes, and I want to open it up to the audience for questions, comments, insights. Elmer, let's see. Thank you, Nicole.
I can hear him. He's right there.
Yeah. So to your comment about what you learn and the new hiring approach that you're taking, I'm coming across challenges in compensation. Like, how do you retain and attract talent? We're all competing for the same labor. And so what are we doing as an industry to get senior leadership used to the idea that we have to elevate the compensation?
Basically, in my experience, it comes down to, do they want productivity? I mean, I basically hold that at hostage, because as far as I'm concerned, you get what you pay for still in this world. So if they're looking to keep me within a pay scale for some of the talent I see, then they're gonna have less than what they're supposed to. Now they have to also understand and trust the fact that I know, which is hard for those who equate, money, power, and position with intelligence, which I think is not even close to the truth. But that being said, if they trust you, and again, you're building that relationship, they understand that in order to get the job done, make money, then they're going to pay with the market rate. And again, by virtue of that collaboration, you can tell them, it's just like materials and lead times, it's a trust factor, which is again why I'm hiring these kinds of people. They engender trust. So I think right now I'm able to pay what the market is. I have the analytics to prove it, which I do have, and all the contractors and everything else and developers that I know, I can trust that they're telling me the same thing of what they're paying. So as soon as I can do the market, I can justify. If I can't, then it becomes trust.
There is one workaround, and it's difficult to figure out how this is going to work. But the idea, I'll share the idea and the concept, and that is you can have a very skilled technical person, and they are compensated very well, but they don't work for the hospital per se. They're time shared amongst multiple facilities. So the key is that then they can be paid more, because if you look at the payroll at a hospital, they've got grades and all that, and you can't get that person at the level you need to. But if they're somehow sourced another way, and they can be a shared resource, and they can be comped at whatever level that the market demands that to be done. Now, that being, going back to the shared service conversation I mentioned earlier, that is a way to think about where is that going to, again, equip these technicians that can service a specific issue at a facility, get in, get out. It may be $100 an hour, but if they can do it in 15 minutes, that productivity will offset that high pay, but then the person still gets the high salary rate.
Back to your point, on a network level, we're a network. My whole team is network. So each campus has its own, each one has its stipend almost each year. So to your point, if we're building buildings or renovating a hospital at one of our campuses, maybe 50 miles away, that campus pays for it. Yeah. So you do share it, and by sharing the load of the salary, it hits the network.
Yeah, helps.
And I'm going to let Jamie have the last word here.
And I was just going to say on that end, so it's also development too. So we spend a lot of time, where is that career path going? So what are they interested in doing? How do we retain them by keeping them motivated to learn and grow in the organization? Compensation is a part of that. But we've found that compensation is out there, and it's really keeping the person involved and showing them that we are investing in them to keep them in that role and help them grow their career for the future. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate all of you in your insights. I know I learned a lot. We have just less than 30 seconds left. So I want to thank you all for listening to us, and I appreciate all of you sharing your thoughts as well. And I'm going to turn it back to you, Nicole, for the last 26 seconds.
Well,
that you
thank
get.
you, Renee, for keeping these guys on time and on target. I appreciate it.
It's difficult
Fabulous
with
job.
some of us. It's very difficult.
You were actually pretty toned down. I was actually kind of impressed.
I
I'm
didn't drink
surprised.
coffee. I had no coffee this morning, and I ate a lot. So.